Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this Daily Maverick webinar on misinformation and learning the tools that journalists use to verify misinformation and to verify sources of the flood of information and sources that are out there on the internet. Today, we're joined by media entrepreneur, publisher, trainer, and consultant, Jakub Gornicki, who's joining us from Warsaw in Poland today. Say hi, Jakub.
Hey, hello, everybody. Hello, Styli. Good to see you again.
Great. So today we're going to run through the tools that journalists use to verify information. Jakub is going to take us through some practical demonstrations of tools and approaches that journalists use and the stuff that they teach. But before we do that, I'm going to take us through a little bit of a history around misinformation and fake news, a little bit of context to the problem that we're seeing all around the world that has been a problem, and as we'll see, is not a new problem to society, but something that goes back quite a long time. As long as people have been talking to each other, really, this problem has been around.
That's true.
So just to get some housekeeping under the way, we will run for an hour. I'm pretty sure we'll run out of time with a topic such as big and important as this one, and also to thank our sponsors, Brand South Africa, for making this possible today. This is a hugely important topic that we're covering. And that we're hoping to get out some great information tools and resources that you can use out there as well. Please feel free as audience participants to drop questions into the chat. As we go, we'll be monitoring and trying to answer as many of those questions as we can in this session. If we can't get to all of them, we'll try and follow up with that, either with articles on Daily Maverick or some information direct to all the people who attended. And just to thank Jakub for taking time to be with us today, and all of you, our participants and attendees. And I'm hoping we can make this a really engaging and enlightening and informative session. So I'm going to kick things off with just a very brief history on misinformation and fake news. And fake news is obviously this term that has been thrown around and almost bastardized in the last couple of years. The problem is so much more than just fake news, and fake news is not a catch-all term that we can use to qualify with the actual problem. So what we're hoping that you'll get out of today is to learn to be able to spot suspicious posts and articles on various different platforms, how to check images and videos for authenticity, and what questions to ask, and how to check sources like journalists should. If nothing else, at the end of this, you should also be able to stalk your ex-lovers with a lot more efficiency and efficacy. Right, so starting off on the different types of misinformation and disinformation out there, you could almost plot this on a sort of a falseness and intent to harm scale and access. So for example, misinformation is just, mistakes that are made without intent to harm. Sometimes we don't get the caption right on a photo for whatever reason, or we rely on the wires that that supply these photos to us, and if they make a mistake, we republish that. But generally, we can look at misinformation as a way that is not intended to create any malice or harm. We can add satire into that as well, and sometimes satire, as we'll see, can become harmful without that intention. You then have disinformation, which is fabricated or deliberately manipulated material, and we can throw conspiracy theorists and rumors into there. And obviously, given the COVID-19 escalation of information and just the flood of stuff out there, we've seen a lot of this come up. And then there's malinformation, which is designed and created with the intention of hurt, with the intention of malice. And we can see there that there's a variety of different kinds of malinformation out there that we need to be wary of, and hopefully today we'll learn some of the tools to fight against that. So going back into this, we need to understand why people create misinformation, and that can broadly fall into three or four categories. And the first one that we see quite a lot of is political gain. We can see that some of the malinformation campaigns that have come out, especially with big elections around the world, and sort of popularized or seen to great effect in Brexit, the American elections, and a couple of other elections, and even going back to the pre-internet era of the early days of, even in South Africa's history, we've seen information peddling and influence peddling for political gain. Others do it for commercial gain, and so we see a lot of people creating, fake articles to generate strong emotive reactions from people that will drive page views on these fake websites in order to gain commercially from the ad revenue that's created. There's personal gain, generally people just wanting to be in the know or to be seen to be in the know, passing around information that isn't necessarily true. And then also satire, which has seen a bit of a dive, I think, in the last couple of years as the proliferation of fake news and misinformation out there has almost rendered satire almost too dangerous or too obsolete, even in this day, as we've seen how digital information has changed the nature of satire. But all of this relies on normal people spreading all this information and this content being used to trigger strong emotive reactions so that people will then share that information, which has obviously become a lot easier in today's age than it ever was before. But this is not a new problem. This is a cartoon from 1894, which talks about cheap sensationalism and fake news as a problem back then. So we can see this isn't something that is just unique and specific to our generation. One example of where media has played a role in generating harm was the media war between Joseph Pulitzer and William Hearst back in the late 1819 for the 19th century started. And so we have these two media moguls battling it out for supremacy in New York and pushing their papers in a war that turned and took sensationalist reporting, and between the two, and the fight for dominance between the two helped incite war between, or trigger the war between the United States and Spain over the occupation of Cuba. Historians argue about the exact amount of influence, but what can't be denied is the level of sensationalism that was reported on in that period, which undoubtedly did have a contribution. Whether the impact it can be debated or not. Another example from a long time ago is the War of the Worlds, which was this alien invasion, Orson Welles' radio drama that was read out on the air that caused panic, people thinking that an alien invasion was actually underway. And so we can see how satire can create its own level of panic, and we can see that why today's world it's very dangerous to be putting satire out there, and almost it's become obsolete, because the minute you brand it satire so that people know it's satire, reduces the original intent of the content. Before we jump onto the next couple of slides, I'd like to ask my colleagues to start the poll. And think and ask our attendees what they think, which platform they think or they have experienced the most amount of misinformation on, especially in the last 2 months. Where have we seen the most amount of information? If you could just vote for that selection and let us know, because that'll inform some of the work that we do today. So some recent examples of this, and there are just so many, so it's very difficult to pick them out, but I just wanted to highlight some of the ones that had really big impact. And so these two articles, Pope Francis shocks world, endorses Donald Trump for president, and WikiLeaks confirms Hillary Clinton sold weapons to ISIS, ? Were two of the most shared or the most engaged with articles of the 2016 American elections. Now, this next slide shows us how in the build-up to the elections, how mainstream news was overtaken by fake news. And we can see that those two articles in particular gained almost 1 million engagements each on Facebook alone, right? So before Twitter, before all the other platforms got involved, those two, and obviously with the network effects of how many people that could actually then reach, becomes a massive number. Now, the impact of all of that was what we saw in the outcome of that election was that Donald Trump, by a narrow amount, became president of the United States, thanks mainly to the net effect of 80,000 people's votes in 3 states. Now, if we take into account the amount of people that were reached by those articles now, and assuming that not everyone believed those, but there are some people who may have believed them and obviously took that to heart. Some people who might find that an endorsement by the Pope is a good enough reason to vote for a particular candidate, but also, obviously the very emotive reaction to supporting ISIS could affect people's decision to vote. And so this is a huge outcome, and obviously the knock-on effect of President Trump now being in power and seeing how America has would have reacted to, let's say, the COVID-19 pandemic in a different way, had a different president been involved. We can see that the impact is huge. Here we've seen more recently that, thanks to other disinformation out there, people have actually taken to drinking disinfectants to prevent COVID-19. Another survey found that 40% of Republicans think that Bill Gates wants to use COVID-19 vaccines to implant location tracking microchips in recipients. And so we can see that the impact of this is far-reaching, not only in our personal networks, but also at a national and an international level. Before we get to the results of the poll, I have another question for all our attendees, and maybe Jakub, you can participate too. What do you think all of these people have in common?
Her. No. Well. Is this also a poll?
No, this isn't a poll. People can drop that into the chat.
Okay.
But Jakub, maybe you can answer. What do you think these people have in common?
I don't know. I smell as if whatever I answer, you're going to make a fool out of me. So,
okay,
yeah.
I'll spare you the blushes. These people are randomly selected from a website called thispersondoesnotexist.com. They are computer-generated images of people's faces, and they do not exist. An algorithm has been trained to create faces, and we can see how realistic these faces look. And they do not exist. There is another version of this website created by the same person called This Cat Does Not Exist, also where the creator tried to do the same with cats, wasn't as successful. But we can see that, and I think we'll probably touch on it in your presentation, where AI is going to, and the problem that deep fakes will create for us, and create new problems for us. Some local examples of how fake news and misinformation has affected us. And so in South Africa, where we have one dominant political party, the intention for political gain was not to get new people into power, but was rather to affect the narrative that a corrupt president and that a corrupt government was doing a great job. And so television stations, newspapers were created, and they were used to not only siphon off money from the government, but also to push a narrative, a propaganda narrative, that a corrupt and deficient government was actually doing a good job. More recently, we've also seen that a legacy newspaper group, the internet arm of that group, has been running articles which, in the build-up to the release of a Judicial Commission of Inquiry report, started creating its own narrative that that the main respondents and the targets of the Commission of Inquiry did nothing wrong in the report. And so we can see here in the build-up to the release in March, leaked PIC reports shows Dan Machila and Dr. Survey did no wrong. PIC Inquiry clears ex-CEO Dan Machila and Black-owned companies. When the report was finally leaked, the report was finally released to the public, other traditional and respected websites came out with the real story, which was it was a scathing report and recommended that further action and investigation and criminal investigation be conducted against those parties named. And this is one of my favorite ones, Jakub. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but a Zimbabwean journalist who was interviewed anonymously in the Mail and Guardian confirmed that he runs a fake news website in South Africa to generate enough money to pay for his real news website in Zimbabwe. And this is the state of affairs that we find ourselves in, that real journalists are actually turning to the commercial gains that fake news can generate in another country to fund local news. And then also just to also bring in the impact of WhatsApp into the conversation. In 2019, the Reuters Institute did a study which showed that 49% of South Africans use WhatsApp as their primary network for sharing and discussing news. If I look at the poll, and just so that I can end that out now, we can see that WhatsApp narrowly put Facebook 40% to 39% in the poll as a platform that most people come across misinformation. So we can see the prevalence of WhatsApp now as a medium to distribute news, to discuss news, and the challenges around that. And also, I guess with that is the deficiency and the irresponsibility of Facebook and WhatsApp to really step up and come to the party with regards to verification beyond the limited measures that they've taken to date. And just with that, speaking of WhatsApp, just to share with you all this conversation between Jakub and myself earlier today, where he said that recommended I must watch this documentary. It exposes the real truth that they don't want to know. With documentary,
it's not true.
Plandemic, the movie, and that's because the Queen of England and Bill Gates have mainstream media in their pockets. And so, just going to show how quickly and easily information can spread through the social networks, and also that fakewhatsapp.com is the other site where I created, obviously, this fake version of a conversation, but looks pretty real. Jakub, I'm going to hand it over to you to go from here. That's my quick sort of setup to today's webinar. I hope that provides some context to our attendees and our participants. And I'm going to hand that over to you.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you very much for this great introduction. I just want to say hello to all of the people who are watching us. There's so many of them. You must be doing a great job at Daily Maverick. If you have so much trust. And I want to talk to you about this trust, and how you can ensure that everything is fine, especially what tools to use to develop this skill of being able to self-verify certain things. So now imagine that you're scrolling through Facebook or you're scrolling through Twitter, and you see this information that Daily Maverick subscription is just right now $0. It's completely free, and you're like, yes, finally. And what happened, before you get too excited, about this, how can we actually make sure that it's all true or not? So one thing to notice, especially between social media platforms, is that we are very much able to distinguish between websites if we go to the websites. But when a link to a story is actually shared on social media, a lot of design from the platforms is applied. So it actually takes some time for us to notice whether that story is coming from Daily Maverick, from Outriders, or from New York Times, or from some crazy source. So first of all, I gave you this idea that Daily Maverick membership is off. Well, you have to notice maybe that website is a satire, because one of the things when you Styli were making the distinction between disinformation, misinformation and malinformation. Satire is something what we know is true, although we actually laugh at it because it's not true. So, and there is probably, The Onion or the Borowicz report done by the New Yorker, and there's plenty of other examples in Poland. There is Aż Dziennik, which creates fake stories to make us laugh. And we all know that if it comes from this URL, it's definitely fake, but it serves a different purpose. The other thing which is really important to distinguish, you either have really not credible sources or semi-credible sources. And here, well, either you have to just know those websites. In some cases, it's hard to know. Some propaganda websites operate under that most of the information they publish, it's true. And then from time to time, they just create absolutely fake information. So it then confuses the people who read them. So there is plenty of this. And the first thing you should have to notice is the URL. And what happens is, for example, sometimes you have websites which really perfectly, almost perfectly, want to fool you that that you are actually visiting, in this case, let's say ABC News. As you can see, the URL is so clear, it's so comparable, that when you have a first look, you're like, what is the difference? So this is an example from here, from Poland. Try to guess which website is fake. I can tell you it's on the left side, but at the first glimpse, you have to notice what is the pattern we use to discover news these days. And now still a lot is coming from platforms. The platforms keep changing. It used to be Facebook and Twitter. In your case, as Styli was saying, WhatsApp is growing. So still, this becomes our entry point. We less and less go directly to a website, and that's how our journey begins. So this is why we have to be extra careful for this. You have manipulated URLs. Sometimes you get even perfect copies of websites, which try to sometimes steal traffic, sometimes inflict fake information. So the first thing which you can do, especially what we do as journalists when we try to establish, especially when it comes to less known websites, or when we see that there is suddenly a new website showing up, the ownership is not clear, and so on, we go to Whois. Whois is a tool where you can check the records of the domain, who is the owner, when was it registered. Okay, it's not a perfect tool in terms of you will not sometimes be able to see that, I don't know, Outriders is owned by me, by Jakub. It can be a company. I can also try to mask it and so on. But it is a great starting point, which takes you through and actually tells you initially who might the owner be. Now, if you have problems and you want to dig more, there is a tool called completedns.com. It's a freemium tool, which means that you get certain changes, certain checks of a URL for free. If you want to check more, then you have to pay something extra. But this allows you, if the domain exists for a longer time, this allows you to see the history. It's like, I don't know, when you buy a car and you wanna know its history of ownership. Who was the previous owner, how many accidents did it have, and so on and so on. With the domains, maybe there is no accidents, but you can see how the ownership of that domain was actually changing over time. This really allows you to do, because sometimes, let's say, maybe someone didn't have masking enabled and so on, so you can actually see how was changing. The other thing is, and the other tool which you can use is archive.org. It's actually a great tool not only for verification, but also to have fun, because, well, archive.org exists for a long, long time, and, well, it archives the web. So it has pictures, let's say, taken of the websites, how they look like. And on the right side, you can actually see how BBC site used to look like in 2005. Which is exactly 15 years ago. So you go, you put you put the URL of the site, and you can see how many shots. By shots, I mean when archive scans, they go someday and they make like a photo of the site, which is more HTML. It's actually a tool I use to restore some content I lost, because I found it here in archive.org. So that's something, if the website is brand new, it will not have a huge history here. If it's new, if If it exists for a longer time, it will be here most likely, at least maybe not as well preserved as BBC, but definitely some shots will be here. Okay, so we are still checking our website and we are like, okay, the ownership maybe didn't tell us a lot. The content looks kind of okay, but then we are suspicious. So what we can do? The other thing what we usually see is that a lot of those websites which try to especially create more of a targeted approach when it comes to giving you misinformation, they are very much interconnected. Just to give you another example, usually when Facebook takes down pages or groups, they have been working together. They establish their own credibility by sharing, by retweeting, and so on and so on. And so on. So kind of similar with websites. So with the Link Explorer tool, you can go and see basically what are the top followed link to this site. And you have usually a difference, whether you go here, you said on the right side, you have a rather okay website, it links to established sources. Whereas here on the left side, that is actually VHT24 is an absolute spreader of fake information in Poland. So you can see they have some really shitty examples, and you can see that a lot of those links takes you either nowhere or to some even more shady websites and so on and so on. So that is another way you can actually see how that website is interconnected in the web, If you can hear the piano in the back, that's my younger daughter. She decided that it's a really good time to take her piano skills, practice her piano. So, and the last example, which I want to show you on the URL verification, that is a Chrome extension which you can install if you use Google Chrome. It's a fake killer. So basically, it will tell you. Once you go to your you go to social media feed, it will give you like that this URL had how many problem with fake information, let's say, URL had. So in here you have a comparison. The Guardian has 2 debunked articles, whereas RT.com has Russia Today 520 debunked articles. So there is let's say a clear signal here that maybe someone is more doing this on purpose, rather than, because here it's a very important information also, for you when it comes to assessing, mistakes happen. I think most of the media outlets I know have made a mistake, and I don't think, I mean, it's always a bad thing, but there is a difference, when you make an honest one and you immediately, let's say, debunk it yourself, apologize, go out of it. Those things happen. Even as you can see, the Guardian 2 here in this particular case, probably they had more, but that's what I want to say. Before that, we were talking, before we started this, we were simply talking about trust, and that's basically going out of a mistake is also something which tells you how an organization deals if something like this happens. Okay, half an hour to go. As you can see, here is a short menu, but we will go with image verification. Now, image verification is really important because most likely you know this photo and you know that although it's a great shot, it's not exactly true. And that tells you a lot. Why should we be really careful these days when it comes to assessing image? Not only because it can be faked, but, well, perspective changes everything, especially in journalism. So, and that's another example which went viral some time ago. When was it? 2017, the shark in Houston. Now here it's a very easy way to spot it. That if you zoom into the mirror, you can actually see, hey, I don't think it's true. I don't see the shark there. So the shark was just added here. And usually when some catastrophes like this happen or floods, we see some sometimes more satire images showing up. Sometimes information which spread. If you see here, that photo got so many retweets and so many likes that it has been. I mean, I remember seeing this photo on social media, and I have no idea who Jason Michael is. So there's a couple of tools which you can use, and they're really easy in terms of because the access to them is really easy. So one of my favorite tools is Google Reverse Image Search. So here is actually an example of a different photo going viral, basically showing you a photo of the crashed Malaysia Airlines plane. Now, once we actually do Google, when we take this image and throw it into reverse image search, something else shows up. And what happens? This photo is very similar to a photo, maybe not a photo, to a scene, which then is a photo from the TV show Lost. And so someone just took this photo and edited it, added the Malaysia Airlines colors and painting, removed the whatever airline it was in the TV show, and then distributed it as information. So yeah, and that photo of the Malaysia Airlines also went viral. So here's an example of how, yeah.
Jakub, just to, the issue of the reverse image search is one of the most powerful tools that we can use, because a lot of that happens and gets shared very easily on WhatsApp. And I always imagine that could be such a great and easy one for WhatsApp to implement. If an image is shared more than X amount of times, they tag it now with that forwarded label at the top. But why not just automatically do a reverse image search on something that gets shared 1,000 times, and bring in the date and the first use and link to the first use of that article on the web. It would go such a long way by WhatsApp to be able to reduce the amount of images and even videos that are shared out of context.
Yeah, well, WhatsApp is a very interesting platform for me when it comes to thinking about verifying information, because first of all, it doesn't happen publicly. So what Twitter, Facebook, I don't know, Pinterest, and what YouTube have in common, that those are public platforms. Whenever we post something, it's usually publicly accessible, which means that it's much easier for different fact checkers or journalists to reach you with that information. Whereas if I talk to you, Styli, our conversation is encrypted, which means that technically there is no way for WhatsApp to immediately tell us, like, hey, Styli, the thing Jakub sent you is actually a lie. And do not get me wrong, I think it's a fascinating discussion on a philosophical, level in terms of like privacy versus this. WhatsApp has been trying to deal with this by certain things. One is that they've narrowed down the number of people who can participate in a group, and it goes down and down and down, because groups have been becoming one of the ways where you could amplify a message. The other thing, they've also experimented during the Brazil elections, because Brazil is a huge WhatsApp country. It's like 100% people in Brazil uses WhatsApp, basically. And they've also tried to do a verification there. I agree with you that empowering people with tools would be one way of keeping the privacy of the conversation. So there is no bot or no one listening in, let's say, to the conversation, that you can click easily on a thing. And actually, I have a tool which kind of works like this, and it's called, wait, because here is how you can do Google image search on your own. You basically go to images.google.com, and here is this little image icon, and then you can either paste image yourself or you can put a link to it, and then basically see what's important. And then there is this for Chrome, there is this called RevI extension, which adds this, creates on you, and when you right click on the image, it will simply add the possibility for it will run the search for you in Google. Very simple thing, but also very, very helpful. Actually, RevI is the plugin to which I'll be actually coming back. Does that answer your question, Styli?
Yeah, I think the challenge is around the encryption that WhatsApp has over communication, but it just it feels strange that they're able to detect and label something that has been forwarded so many times, but then stop short of actually being able to add something of more value to that, to the sharing of that particular image. So yeah, very difficult situation to get right.
I think thinking of what WhatsApp is trying to do is, if we were to compare it to coronavirus infections, so the problem is to how do we stop the curve before the fact checkers can get their can do their job. And when fake news is being shared on Twitter, on social media, it just blows up. And the biggest problem for fact checkers is that never the debunked information reaches as many people as the fake information in the first place. So for me, I am personally for keeping the encryption, for being media literacy aware, that, hey, not everything is true, especially online. Exactly knowing some tools like this to, if I'm suspicious of something, to be able to check it. On the other hand, if the spread is limited, it doesn't reach, let's say, the whole population. So yes, harm is done, but it is not, election flipping potential, public discourse changing. Those are really dangerous for the society moments, for which we have to be, aware and somewhat prepared that this may happen.
So basically flatten the curve of misinformation is what we're trying to do, or what they're trying to do in this moment. Jakub, there was a question earlier, I think, from Helen, who asked about how do you deal with someone, a friend, maybe a family member or a colleague, who shares something that is obviously faked or has turned out and has been checked to be misinformation. And just, do you have any tips on maybe the kind of language, or how do you approach speaking to people about something that has been shared to be misinformation?
That's hard, to be honest. I'll give you, and to all of the people who watch us, Polish society is very polarized. I don't know how is your society, but Polish society is very between liberals and between conservatives. And frankly speaking, those are two different bubbles right now, which have their own media, and my family, one side is on this side, the second side is on this side, and I can tell you it's hard. We try to talk, we try to give examples, and the problem, the big problem is, and I think for me it starts with understanding, is that person to be persuaded? So is someone still operating more or less on facts, or are we already past this phase and we are talking to someone who is taking, how do you call it, more of belief?
Yeah, we just won't listen to any reason or to any fact. It's incredibly difficult, and I guess the advice is really, obviously people are very in an emotive state, using the right kind of language, not coming out as sort of being accusatory, talking about, hey, I happen to check this out. It doesn't make me think the same thing. Like, help me understand why you think this is true. And I guess it's really just a case of trying to be, empathetic. Some people come from a state of fear, which is why they believe what they believe. As you say, their media diet is one of reinforcing the bubble that they're in, or the polarized nature of the bubble that they're in. And it is very difficult. But I guess my only advice would be just to not come out guns blazing. Don't call them an idiot. Don't accuse them of spreading misinformation, and really try and take it in. And unfortunately, it's incumbent upon us as the rational ones to kind of lead them to a path of maybe considering this might not be the case.
I agree with you. When someone is on the more of a believer, that's, let's say, the last stage of something which has happened before, that someone had a problem which wasn't addressed. And don't get me wrong here, I'm also very much, when it comes to, in some cases, criticizing us as media, in terms of maybe not doing enough job of listening to people, being too much focused on the politics side of the story rather than the human side of the story. At least where I come from, this is where it all started. So I agree with you that, being non-aggressive is one thing. The other thing is, try, if it's your family member, ask them to add one publication to their information diet. Be like, why don't you do what you do? Just, here is this newsletter from Daily Maverick. Just trust me, have it for a month and let's discuss it later. Because sometimes it's like, how do we call it? water and a rock, it takes slow time. And I think this is a better approach than just, as you said, go guns blazing and like, no, from now on, you are not a conservative, you are a liberal. That change almost never happens. So not to mention over a sentence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I continue, or do
yes,
you
absolutely.
Have more
no, absolutely. There's lots to get through. Let's try and get as many of these through as many of these slides.
Yeah. So one of the other things, I just wanted to finish on the Google image search. Here that image, which you can see. We don't have a poll, but you can throw in your answer to the chat. From which city do you think that bridge comes from? And in the meantime, what I wanted to discuss, especially when we are dealing with images, they all have EXIF data. So when the photo is taken, there is data stored with it. It comes when it comes to exposure and so on. So let's say data from the camera. But if you take a photo with your mobile phone, most likely there is going to be a GPS location embedded there. Now, a lot of social media networks, they actually strip EXIF data when you upload the photo to Facebook and so on and so on. But in many cases, you can actually just check if this will work for you. The other tools which you can use if you want to see, okay, if that image is right or not, if it was played with, or as we call it, photoshopped, is one thing is forensically. So it will look for different strange patterns, which basically tell you, hey, that probably has been paintbrushed somewhere here. Or the one of the really cool tool which I like is the InVid forensic analysis, because it is looking for inconsistencies in the photo. So you can see that once you upload this photo, first of all, no EXIF data, which is not a signal that something is wrong with the photo, just so you know. As I said, if you take it from Twitter, most likely no EXIF data or some much less data will be here. But here you can, this menu shows up here, but here you can see that, hey, something is wrong with this flag, which basically tells us that the heat, let's say, map is much different of this photo than it should be, and that this photo is not that this flag was actually added here, because here you can see this is the original photo, and this, so it's much different because it comes from Spain, from the Catalan, from the protests in Barcelona. So this flag actually changes the whole perception of this photo.
Jakub, we had most people responding to the question about the bridge as the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I'm looking through the questions, the responses, and I see one from Monique Valhoff, who suggested that it could be Lisbon, and one from David in Edinburgh. Will you reveal? Lisbon is the correct one. Well done to Monique.
Lisbon, there we don't have gifts, but you can imagine that you just want a virtual t-shirt. But so yeah, it's Lisbon, exactly Lisbon, and this photo, this example plays with your let's say our stereotypes memory, and yeah, 25th Abril Bridge in Lisbon. I did it, of course, on purpose to play with you, but you can use reverse image search and then check it. So, and sometimes it happens, especially for the mainstream media, that takes some photo from stock, which doesn't perfectly illustrate the information, which would then go for this. It's still, for me, harmful, but maybe not in more of the misinformation, but it sometimes happens, that the article has no images and someone then takes just a random photo. And you may end up reading an article about San Francisco with the Lisbon Bridge, and you will not even know it. Okay, going back to your example, Styli, your catchy question, which is the images of the people who do not exist. It's improving. It's improving, as you can see, 2014 versus 2019. The technology has improved. So I just want to take you through. Give you some ideas when you look at a photo of a person, what can be a signal that this photo has been tampered with. So first of all, we are looking into the background, and we're either looking for different strange noises, because AI usually takes a couple of images of people who actually exist, and it mixes it, so it may confuse the background. some strange text, which used to be a text, but it's no longer. Maybe AI simply didn't understand what's it, and it played around with it. The other way is to look at hair. Sometimes hair, because there's so many of them, and there's, for those who have, I wear a hat because I don't have hair. But so I'm actually much easier for AI to play with. But yeah, especially look at this one. Well, most likely it's not like because this gentleman wanted to look like this. Here is another strange thing. Here is simply, this is also really strange. So hair is very strange. It's very hard for AI to play around with because there's so many of it, and it's so easy to make a mistake there. So look closely at hair. If that photo has been tampered with, most likely, if there is an error, it's going to be exactly in the hair. Okay, now with teeth. Again, here we can see that this gentleman has a gigantic one compared to the other one. Here is also some, this is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, like both ones and both twos are almost the same, so it looks very strange. So just keep your eye on the teeth. It's not exactly about how shiny they are, but if they look more or less natural. The other thing is strange things happening to the symmetry. And now we know that our faces are kind of symmetrical, but usually this is not 100% symmetry. There are, of course, mistakes. Some people have even one ear slightly larger and so on and so on. But, of course, we do not see usually people in the streets with eyes with two different colors. The same way, those are two different, let's say, eye types, like the eyeball is different here. And here, well, that's, of course, possible that lady decided to have two different earrings, but this is definitely an AI generation mistake. It's not that it's simply half of it or something. So those are like things to see. Well, we still have some time to go when it comes to the AI images, but this is something to really watch out to. So right now, let's jump into a video verification. Maybe you have seen this video. This is how my landing always looks like in Warsaw when you land. So yeah, that's how we do it in Poland. Now, of course, this video is fake. That's not how planes. Although I gotta be honest, I saw this video too. First time I was like, really? Is that possible? That was my first question when I looked at it because it was so well faked. But then I was like, no, it's rather not possible. So let me. There is a couple of things which you can do here. So first of all, to detect it, there is a very good actually a desktop tool called watchframebywframe.com. You go there, you put the link to your YouTube video, you select how you want to watch it, one frame. It will basically allow you to spot mistakes in a video because yes, when you watch the whole animation of the plane and so on, like let's say it lasts 30 seconds, you may not notice the difference. But if you are a fact checker and you are looking at a video and you're trying to really see if it was played with, watching frame by frame will most likely, you will get some errors, and that's how you spot it. Here is a different video where you see a mistake here and so on. So maybe you have seen this video too, which is the eagle which attacks a toddler. The guy is watching a nice eagle, and then it kind of takes the baby. So here is a watch frame by frame, and you can see that at certain point, the eagle is actually disconnected. It's almost like Star Trek Enterprise, two different modules here. And at this stage, we know that this video that is simply has been played around with, and that eagle was actually animated. So watchframebywframe.com, very simple tool, very powerful. If you really wanna just analyze it frame by frame. Another way to do it is Citizen Evidence by Amnesty International tool. It basically allows you to get more data on the certain video. Now, what's really also cool about this, it will take you some thumbnails for it, and you can see reverse image search. So it's already connected to this Google reverse image search. So if you really want to just run through the video quickly, it will get some files for you. It will get some JPEG files for you. And for example, if you're trying to establish a location, or maybe if it's similar to something, it's really easy to do. Because yeah, sometimes there are different ways to use Google reverse image search. You know, sometimes Google can tell you, oh, this photo was taken here and there. So,
Jakub, I think the message here is that if a piece of content, if a video is either too good to believe or creates a very strong emotive reaction in you that makes you angry or that makes you want to immediately share this, and to really just create almost like a mental fire break and go, hang on a second, is this too good to be true? Should we be checking this before I pass this on and I share this and create and add weight to this misinformation campaign or piece of content? Let me go and check that out. Let me go to Invid. Let me go do a reverse image search. And I think that's the message from this is that, hang on a second, have I been triggered here in some way? Is someone really trying to play with my emotions in order to get me to pass this on? And what can I do to then go and just before I take any action, just check it out?
Yeah. Another way, which is you have the Invid Chrome extension, which takes a video, and it will also generate a lot of frames for you, which you can then take and scan for. So yeah, I mean, deepfake video is another thing which we are not seeing yet that much. We've actually more seen examples of, let's say, showing the potential of it, like this song where politicians sing and so on and so on. So this is really something to be really watch out for. And I think the biggest problem right now is that, there are really, in some cases, people are really trying to, I mean, this battle is ongoing, as you were saying. So it was simply people who wanted to do propaganda had different tools in their array 5 years ago. We have caught up by having tools which allow us to fact check it and be faster, and platforms are, well, could be doing more, but are definitely trying much more than they have been 5 years ago. We have recently seen what Twitter did with Donald Trump tweets, for example, which has been, I think, a historical decision from the platform to take a side and go so bluntly against an elected politician of this magnitude. So yeah, I have to agree with you. We have to be really careful what we share, especially when it's important and politically, or we have an election season and so on and so on, and we don't want to be, spreading this further. Of course, there can be a fake video of Happy Panda eating an ice cream, which maybe is not damaging democracies around the world, but and you may want to share it, but then it's really crucial to know it. Okay, guys, we have 7 minutes left. I don't know what to do. So, I mean,
Jakub, I think maybe what we can do is just look at some of the questions that are coming through from the audience and the attendees. Some people are asking about Daily Maverick's process around fact checking, and if I can just share that there's obviously a level of instruction and training that we try and provide to all our staff, so that when they are constructing and creating stories that they know what to look out for. I mean, we're not a dedicated fact-checking organization like some that are set up specifically to debunk articles and information that are out there. But in our own process, we try and make sure that our journalists are equipped with the base level training and access to tools in order to make sure that we are checking out our sources of information and making sure that we're not part of the problem as far as possible. And that's training that happens repeatedly. It's training that journalists and skills that they build up over time. And it's almost like this repeated process that needs to happen. But there's certainly, we can't be relied on either as an organization or as an industry to be doing all the fact checking, because there simply just aren't enough of us out there. There are not enough journalists. There are not enough dedicated fact checkers. We need the platforms to step up their game. And we also need the public to understand, why people are doing these things and what they can do as well, because the problem is just too big.
The problem is, unfortunately, very, very big. The good thing is that we start to be more positively suspicious, I would say. So we are not like, another metaphor which I want to throw here at the open is to compare it to food. It's like you still probably all go to a shop to pick up something, but when you check the price, you're always like, is the tax added? Is it in small letters, or is the VAT included? And so I think the low-cost airlines are the best in faking the price, the actual price versus the price they advertise. So here for me, it's kind of like this, to be slightly suspicious in terms of like, and being able to then determine what is the final price. When it comes to information, it's kind of like this, because I will never tell you, don't trust anybody. I think this is counterproductive to society. I think in general, it's better to trust someone, people, friends, news sources, and then yes, maybe occasionally be disappointed when a mistake is made. That mistake is something different, I think, than misinformation. It simply happens. We all make mistakes. Then, as we were discussing, live in the reality where you trust simply no one, because that is just hard. I think, just trust no one. I know, and this is really curious because, okay, for your readers, they maybe don't attend as we do all the journalism events, but there was a time, maybe 2-3 years, when almost every journalist event would have this slide, trust the journalism goes down, and that is true. And I don't think this is necessarily bad, because on the other hand, it's always a matter of asking the question. What we see is that the trust to selected news sources goes actually much higher. So it's not like the trust disappeared from journalism. It's simply maybe to a category it's going down. But then we see a lot of media which actually are more and more trusted every day because they have process, because they are very transparent. And I think transparency is also very important. Something which really helps you to understand when someone asks you about your processes, that if you have a process established and that process is then transparent, well, yes, it may happen that, I don't know, you may have the greatest process at Daily Maverick and still some mistake will get through it. If then you communicate it transparently to your people, like, yes, the process was here. Unfortunately, in this particular case, it didn't work, then it's different. Did you switch off my screen sharing?
Yeah, just we're almost out of time, Jakub. I'm really sorry. There's been a lot of requests for the slides, and there's just 1 or 2 questions, I think, with regards to some situations we've seen here, especially on WhatsApp, where voice notes have been shared, and the credentials of people are then sort of attached in a text message below that, without people sort of saying who they are in the voice note, and sort of their credentials come in a follow-up text. And people asking, so when that kind of stuff comes through, when a text message comes through purporting to be from a captain of industry or someone else, what can they do with those kinds of situations?
Well, audio is always the hardest to change because it can be different voice and so on and so on. I would basically refer first to the source who sent you this, and try to send you, how did you get this? How did you get this? Because it's very easy to share information on WhatsApp. That's why it's spreading. And just, I think right or left, you just do it and then send to either a group or something like this. So I would first basically see who sent you this and say, like, why did you send me this? Because you find it funny, because you find it intriguing. So yeah.
Yeah, there are also a couple of fact-checking organizations you can send stuff through. Obviously, some local ones. There's a new one that's just been started in South Africa, real411.org.za, where you can submit either complaints or submit items for verification. So there are some of those organizations out there that do that. But I think the message here, and just before we wrap up, and to thank everyone for their participation, is to be, I think, as you put it earlier, positively suspicious, right? We don't want to live in a world where we trust no one, but we need to be, I guess, especially in this time, skeptical and asking, what could be the intention behind this? And if I feel a really strong emotive reaction to this, what can I do to then follow up and check up on that?
Exactly. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you all for your questions. I see a lot of great ones. I'm amazed by how many people attend your webinars. Very envy of this, and by the quality of the conversation. It's just going crazy on my chat room. So
unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get through all of those questions. To thank you for your participation, Jakub. It was great having you here. We're going to try and collect a lot of these, and we're also going to try and send a copy of the recording. We will send a copy of the recording and see if we can also get some of these slides to people and attendees as well. We're going to post the webinar as a video and an article up on Daily Maverick, but I think also the strength of the interaction and the questions and the desire for more, we're probably going to be following up with a couple more of these sessions. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for participating. Thanks for your time. Thank you to Brand South Africa for making this possible, and to our loyal Daily Maverick readers and audience members for attending today.
Thank you very much. Bye.